On a bitterly cold morning of the 30th of January 1649, following a long and brutal civil war between Crown and Parliament, King Charles I was beheaded in London and the monarchy was abolished. 3 years earlier, in 1646, Parliament had rid the Church of England of its bishops, and when the House of Lords was also abolished in March 1649, virtually the entire centuries-old basis of government in Britain had disappeared, seemingly for good. Little wonder people living at the time called it a world turned upside down. The monarchy was restored in 1660, and the Commonwealth was to last only 11 years. And it was not surprising that the radically new formed government ushered in so bloodily with the end of the monarchy in 1649. That should have caused an upheaval in another enduring aspect of national identity, the coinage. Even when Parliament had control during the final years of the Civil War, change wasn't issued until the death of Charles I, issuing a new design that would best fit the new views in the Republican regime. This was the first period in hundreds of years where the coins didn't bear the portrait of the ruling king and queen, and with the king gone, the House of Commons claimed that it now exercised sovereign power on behalf of the people, and that God had given his approval to the new state of affairs by allowing Parliament to defeat the king in battle. This bold claim was bolstered by the imagery and lettering used on the new coinage. On the obverse side, replacing the traditional monarch's crowned head, there now appeared a shield containing the cross of St. George representing England. This was surrounded by a wreath of laurel and palm, symbolising Parliament's victory and the peace it claimed it had brought. On the reverse side were the conjoined shields of England and Ireland, the latter represented by the Irish harp, along with the date of the issue and the denomination. Scotland, then a separate nation with its own coinage, was not represented, nor was Wales, which was thought of as a part of the Kingdom of England and so covered by the cross of St. George, as is still the case in modern Union Jack. There were also changes to the legends, or lettering, appearing around the edge of the coin's face. Traditionally, these would have been in Latin, given the name of the monarch and an abbreviated list of their titles, including a claim to France, as well as a Latin motto, but this was now replaced with the Commonwealth of England on the obverse, God with us on the reverse. These simple statements not only did away with all references to royal power, they also replaced Catholic-sounding Latin with good Protestant English, and in true Puritan style, laid claim to God's favour and support. Although Charles had been defeated and the monarchy abolished, there were still many people who had been against the execution and were fierce critics of the new Republican regime, led by the so-called Rump Parliament until 1653. Even the coins came in for ridicule, the royalists finding ways to attack the government by poking fun at the new designs. The wording of the legends on either side of the coins, for example, led royalists to observe that God and the Commonwealth were on opposite sides. The appearance of the conjoined shields of England and Ireland also caused amusement, as they bore an uncanny resemblance of the pair of breeches and were referred to in the royalist circles as breeches for the rump, rump being not only the name for Parliament but also a common term for someone's backside. The Republican experiment ultimately failed and the monarchy was restored under Charles II in 1660. Those who had signed his father's death warrant, known as regicides, were rounded up and executed. Even the corpse of Oliver Cromwell was exhumed and hung in chains. A similar lack of mercy was shown to the Commonwealth coinage too. It was suppressed and called in for recoining between 1661 and 1663, with an estimated 2/3 out of the total minted since 1649 being recovered. But what happened to the rest of them? It is thought that most will have been taken abroad and some would have been hoarded, although collectors see them as relatively uninteresting because of the plainness of the design and its uniformity across the denominations. Commonwealth coins are fascinating from a historical and archaeological point of view. They were only in circulation for a short period of time, and they are survivors of a troubled period in British history, when a bloody and decisive war was followed first by the shock of the king's execution, and by then years of political and religious upheaval as the country tried to find an acceptable alternative to the monarchical role. Just as all the political alternatives failed in turn, the new coin's design was also short-lived. Charles II reverting to the familiar centuries-old monarch's head format, which continues in today's money. A coin from Oliver Cromwell's reign is on my bucket list, but the price tag is always the limiting factor. So owning a Commonwealth coin is a very close second to owning a piece of history from one of the most uneasy and worrying times. Some of the smaller denominations like the penny and half-groat are by far the most commonly found, popping up in auctions, eBay, Facebook and detecting, and therefore are some of the most cheapest to obtain too. One of the coins represented during today's video was a contemporary forgery from the time of 1653, of which will be appearing on the channel in the not so distant future. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these coins down below, as I know they aren't well liked by some, due to the plainness and the lack of variety of skill needed to work them out. But always remember the roots of why we're all here. Not to push pieces of history aside and forget about them because other areas are harder and more challenging, which may in turn make us appear smarter or above others, but to appreciate the history that these coins represent and that we are so lucky to enjoy and collect. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and be sure to subscribe for numismatic content, and feel free to leave me a comment down below on what Commonwealth coins you have in your collections. Thanks everyone, and as always, keep collecting.